Good morning. Welcome on this bright and shiny Monday morning. Well, it may be a little damp outside, but in here it is nice and warm, and we're going to be looking at a subject this week that evidently there's no small amount of interest in. We are getting this room good and filled up, and I am grateful for that. How many of you, just out of curiosity, how many of you came to the seminar that it is written put on last year at camp meeting? Several of you did. Well, welcome back. And for those of you who missed last year's, welcome to this one. So we're going to be looking at, it's not a big flowery, wonderful, colorful title, member retention. It doesn't sound real exciting, but what is it? It's how can we nail the back door shut? We get a lot of people who come in the front door. In fact, there are very few Protestant churches who do a better job of winning souls than the Adventist Church. We are one of the best, one of the fastest growing Protestant denominations in the world. Not even a single amen to that. I think that's pretty good. There we go. There we go. But the question then remains, are we keeping everybody who comes in? And I think based on the fact that you're here this morning, we're all on the same page together. Something isn't working as well as it could work in member retention. So I'm going to share with you a number of very practical things that you can do in your church to help the people who do come in stay in. These are very simple things to do for the most part. Are they going to take a little bit of time? Yes. Are they going to take a little bit of effort? Yes. Are some of us going to be moved ever so slightly out of our comfort zones? Yes, we will. Is it worth it? Yes, it is. Absolutely. So I'm going to share a little bit of background, share a few true stories with you today and throughout the week. Now, some of these true stories, in fact, most of these true stories will have the names changed to protect the innocent, but they are still the stories that are absolutely true that are happening in our churches today. Some of them may discourage you a little bit. Some of them may shock you a little bit. Some of them may cause you to nod your head and go, you know what, something like that happened in our church. And so my hope and prayer is that you will be awakened, that you will be inspired, that you will be encouraged, and that you will be emboldened to help with what's going on today in the church. So we're going to start by taking an honest look at what's happening. Have we left the back door open? We know that the front door is open. There are lots of people who are coming into the church, but we also know that the back door is letting a lot of them out. I'm going to share with you a story of a woman named Jane, young woman named Jane. We'll call her a young adult. She was raised as an Adventist, a graduate of one of our Adventist colleges. She met a young man there, also an Adventist, and the church that they were involved in was a very outreach-oriented, evangelistic-minded, very alive church. She and her husband got married, and they moved away to another state. And when they moved to the other state, they started their search for a new church. And so they started going around to the various churches that were within a reasonable distance. And most of the churches that they bumped into, that they visited, really didn't have that outreach spirit. They weren't mission-minded and so forth. And they finally did find one that at least sort of fit their idea of what they were looking for, even though the sermons didn't quite have the spirit that they were used to, and there weren't quite as many outreach activities as they were used to. They figured they'd give that one a try. They started or tried to start a group in the church for young adults, collegiates, if you will. But the group never really took off. It just sort of floundered and died. Then they decided they would try to become a little bit more involved in the fellowship meal committee, the potluck community. And they started to work with that, and there wasn't really, unfortunately, a whole lot of support behind them. People didn't pitch in and cooperate, and whenever they did get something organized, other members would come along after them and fix things and so forth. And as they tried to do things and make the church more alive, if you will, they just found that time and time again they were getting stifled. Eventually, the pastor preached on the chiastic structure of the book of Ruth. And poor Jane and her husband just said, that's the last straw. that we're done, we've tried, we've been diligent, we've done everything, we're done. And so they began to look for a church outside the Adventist faith that had the Spirit of Christ. They eventually found a non-denominational church. They became members of the non-denominational church, and they've continued in happiness there. When asked about her decision to leave the Adventist church, here's what Jane said, and I'll quote her. She says, "In conclusion, I will probably always have a soft spot in my heart for the SDA church. It gave me my foundation in Christ, provided many wonderful memories. I even met my husband through it. It's very much a part of who I am. I know we are where we're supposed to be now, though. Ultimately, everything goes back to my two must-haves, an outward focus and an environment in place to welcome unsaved people. In my experience, that's very hard to find in an Adventist church." Okay? So these are things that are happening today, and I'm going to share more stories with you. Some of them will have happier endings. Some of them will have less happy, I hesitate to call them endings, at least present situations. But what we're all going to find is that there is a silver lining on some of these dark clouds. And if we can focus on that silver lining, we're going to find that a lot of those dark clouds can go away if we're willing to put the time and effort into it. So why do people leave the Adventist church? More often than not, there's no single reason why somebody leaves the church. More often than not, it's a number of reasons. It's kind of a journey that leads them out of the church. For Jane and her husband, it wasn't just one thing that led them to leave the church. What were some of the things that led them to leave? Lack of support. What else? Not too friendly at church. Yeah. Not seeing Christ in the church. No outreach. No outreach. All right, missing old friends. So there's a lot of things that led to Jane and her husband's departure. And we're going to find that that's common with many people who leave. Think of someone that you know who is no longer in the church. How many of you can think of somebody that used to be a part of your church and isn't any? Look at those hands. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. I want you to think of one person or one family that's no longer in the church that you're aware of, and ask yourself what significant events in their journey brought them to that point of decision. Do you know of anything? Can you suspect anything that may have brought them to that decision? I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to kind of think for the first couple of minutes about that family or that person, and then find 2 or 3 or 4 people around you and share about that person or that family's journey out of the church, what contributed to it, and share amongst yourselves some of these stories. And then we're going to pull a few of them, and unless I miss my guess, we're going to hear some common themes as we look at what's really happening. So take about 5 minutes. If you need, jot down some notes. If you need a pen, I have some pens here. Yeah, that would be fantastic. In a very high-tech, high-quality pen distribution center right there. And so if you need a writing instrument, just raise your hand, and my brother there will help you out. We'll take about 5 minutes to, again, just jot some ideas down, some thoughts down, some recollections, reflections down. And sorry about that bag. We try to save money. It is written as best we can. You may keep the pens. So take just a few minutes and talk with some others near you. Make a friend or two, and we'll come back and share some of the things that you have shared with one another. I'm going to eavesdrop, so don't mind me if I pop around where you happen to be. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, let's find our seats again. So right now, as we've been discussing, hopefully we haven't been judging people or critiquing their decisions. We're just looking at it. How many of you heard a sad story or two? Right? there are lots of different reasons that people give for leaving the church. What was, of the stories that you heard, what was one of them that made a significant impact on you? Is anybody willing to share one, either that you shared with your group? Yes, go right ahead. Thought she had to be perfect, knew she couldn't, and gave up. How many of you have met somebody sort of in that same ballpark? Yes. Okay, there was another hand here. Yes.
We just heard the same thing in our group where a father became a perfectionist and then his son couldn't measure up and committed suicide.
All right, father became a perfectionist, son couldn't measure up, and son committed suicide. I'm repeating for the benefit of the recording here. Any other stories? Yes. Okay.
Adventist for years, very, very active in the church and camp meetings and children, writing stories, head elder, school board chairman.
Yeah.
Moved to Ohio, and all we found with family churches that, and these are people who've been involved,
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be involved, couldn't break it.
Yep.
It was a family church.
Yep, family church and change in location. Yep, didn't fit in. Didn't fit in. These are all things that we're going to be talking about. So you're right on the right track, if you will. So what's happening? Here's some statistics and a variety of research data have been pulled together to pull this to what we have here. For every 100 new members that the Adventist Church gains, 49 eventually leave the church. We might, in broad terms, call that what? Half. That's half. Half of the people who come in end up leaving. Can you imagine, if we are one of the fastest growing Protestant denominations today, what if we kept all of those people who stayed in? And not just kept them as warmers of pews, but workers, but disciples. Is it possible? Oh, sure it is. And we're going to find that much of what could be done isn't that hard. It's not, as you might say, rocket science. Much of it is very, very simple. So out of existing members, so these are not new members who come in, but out of existing members, 1 in 3 will leave. That's still a third of people who have been members for a good long time. 1 in 3 is going to leave, statistically. This loss is even more significant among young adults, where up to 70% are leaving the church. Yes?
I'm curious how that compares with those who have been to Adventist academies or those who have been to Adventist colleges.
Yep.
I know what it was 20, 30 years ago. The significance was considerably different.
Yes. There is a difference. I don't have the statistics on that specifically, but I can probably find you some information on it. I know it is better, but not light years better, if you will. So there's still more that we can do. I think we're all in agreement on that. So have we left the back door and the side door and a few of the windows swinging wide open? I think unfortunately we have. So why are people leaving? Here's some good news. Only about 5% of the people leave because of doctrine. 5% because of doctrine. We hate to see that 5% leave because of doctrine. But that's actually good news, because that means that most of the people who leave still what? Still believe. They still say, you know what? That's the truth. What the church is teaching is the truth. But then that leaves us with the question, why are they leaving? If the church has the truth, if it is biblically sound, why are they leaving? The largest portion, 28%, said that they left because they drifted away. And 25% cited a lack of compassion. What's another way of saying there is a lack of compassion? People don't care. The members don't care about me. They've got the truth, but they don't care. Is it possible for us to care a little more? I would hope so. I mean, that's not the most difficult. It shouldn't be the most difficult thing in the world for us to do, is to care about somebody. So why are people leaving? 19% cited a moral failure. Couldn't be perfect. stumbled and fell. 18% said that they just didn't fit in. Somehow they didn't fit in with the rest of the group. 14% felt that there was too much of a focus on minor issues. The main core issues of Christianity weren't what was being focused on. It was the other stuff. So 14% felt that there was too much of a focus on minor issues. So, what do you notice about each of these? People drifted away. There was a lack of compassion, moral failure, not fitting in, focus on minor issues. These can be changed. These can all be changed without too much difficulty. So what do we do? How can we find ways to change these elements? One of the most significant factors in leaving was a stressful life event. Moving out of state, that was Jane's story. Also, I think there was somebody who moved recently that was mentioned a moment ago. A marriage, a divorce, a death in the family, something significant that happened in the person's life. And in many cases, when that thing happened, what do you think the church did? Nothing. You got the answer correct. In many cases, the church did nothing. They went through a divorce. That's too bad. They moved to a new location. Bye. Right? In many cases, the church just didn't do anything. And because of that lack of compassion, or perceived lack of compassion, the member just said, you know what? Evidently, they don't what? They don't care. And if they don't care, I'll go find someone who does. And they'll go find some other church, in many cases, that's just full of people who care. They may not have the right teachings, but at least they care. And if they care, that's what matters to me. And so a lot of people are simply leaving for that reason. So what did the church do? Nothing. No one noticed. No effort was made to reach out. A lot of the people who slip out, it's not, in many cases, a conscious decision that I'm leaving, I'm done. In many cases, they miss a Sabbath. And what happens? Nothing. So they miss another Sabbath. What happens? Nothing. They miss a third, a fourth, a fifth, a 34th, a 35th, a 36th. And what happens? Nothing. Nobody calls. Nobody visits. Nobody cares, at least apparently. And so they just figure, I'm not missed, so let me go find someplace else. Yes?
I think a big problem with that, and I can imagine that people here are interested in this subject. And I think one of the big reasons is, and this is my perspective, is that there is only a few workers in the church, and they are so busy they don't have time to visit these people, because the rest of the people sit in the pew and do nothing.
Yep.
They come to church, they get up, they leave, and that's all they do.
Yeah, you have a classic, in many churches, you have a classic 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And in some churches, it's more of a 90-10 rule. And the more you get toward that 0%, the closer you get, the more the smallish group gets worn out. They just get tired. So a spreading around of the work is very, very helpful. But in order for that to happen, other members need to be inspired to help. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow. So don't miss tomorrow. There is some surprising good news. So I don't want this to be a downer. I want you to see the silver lining on the dark clouds. Very few former members, though, are hostile toward the church. They don't hate the church. They don't even really dislike the church. They believe in what the church believes. It's just that they figure the members don't care in many cases. A total of 58% of those surveyed said that under certain circumstances they would be open to reconnecting with Adventism. And in most cases, what were they looking for? They were looking for evidence that somebody cared. If somebody cared about me, sure. If they showed an interest in me, sure. I'd be open to it. I'd like to. Many of them have very fond memories, like Jane, of the church. Wouldn't mind coming back if certain things changed. In Lift Him Up, page 410, there's a section called The Lost Sheep for July 11th. It says, Jesus has given the parable of the lost sheep for our study. The true shepherd leaves the 99 and goes into the desert at any expense and suffering to himself. How many of the wandering and lost sheep have you sought for and brought back to the fold with a heart full of pitying tenderness, forgiveness, and love? How many words of encouragement have you spoken to the wandering sheep that have cost you pain, anxiety, and much inconvenience? Have you spoken soothing words of hope, courage, and pardon, bearing the wanderer home on your shoulders, rejoicing at every step, and saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost"? So let's talk for just a moment about that sheep. How do you think the sheep felt when it was lost? Abandoned, afraid, scared, lonely, right? Does the shepherd recognize the feelings of the sheep in this story? Yes. How much does the shepherd care about that sheep? A lot. Enough to do what? To leave the 99 and to go search for that one that is lost and scared and feels abandoned. How do you think the sheep feels when the shepherd finds it? It feels special, right? Takes the sheep, puts it on his shoulders, carries it home, and there is much rejoicing, right? So it's a wonderful feeling when somebody comes out and finds you when you are lost. I want to share with you the story of Jim. Jim was a member of the Adventist church, and he drifted away. He'd been away for some time, and there was a new pastor who came in and took over the district. When he did, he decided to go over the books and look for lost members. So he found, in going through the church books, that there were 37 members of the church who had just sort of drifted away. And so he made it his decision, his goal, to go out and contact them. And so he went to go try to visit all of those 37 members. And he tried Jim's house a number of times and couldn't find Jim at home. But the church also did a few mailings to people who had been, or were still on their books, but who had wandered off, drifted away. And one of those mailings got to Jim's house, and it was a church social function that the church was having. And so Jim thought, sure, I'll go check it out. And so he came to the social function. When he did arrive, the pastor met him and struck up a conversation with him and introduced him to his wife. And they started a friendship, and the pastor would go and visit with Jim once a week, just see how he was doing, talk with him, encourage him. And over time, Jim started coming back to church. There were, of those 37 former members that the pastor visited and made an effort to go out and bring back, 8 of them who came back into the church. 8 out of 37. And others, those were ones who were rebaptized or became new members again. Others of those 37 developed a fairly regular habit of attending church. That's not bad. Now, a few months later, the pastor decided to hold an evangelistic series. And they invited the community, and people came out, and at the end of the evangelistic series, they baptized 2 people. Now, you will not hear me speak badly of evangelistic series, right? Because I have been heavily involved in them for the last 18 years, and I believe in them. Amen. However, if you can win 4 times as many people by just visiting them and bringing them back into the church, by all means, please do it. Please do it. Don't not do evangelism. Do both. Because there are a lot of people who are just waiting to be drawn back in. And with not a whole lot of effort, it can happen. But we need new people coming in from the community as well. So don't neglect the one in search of the other. What you'll find is that you've got a lot of people out there who are interested and who will come back. Another pastor shared how he called every former member of his church and asked them what it was that they could do, or that if they could change something about the church, what would they change? And one of the members said, well, the music in the church when I was there was just dead. I mean, there was no life. It was just dead. And so the pastor took note of that and said, hey, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it very much. He made arrangements for a person to come to the church and provide a special music one Sabbath. So what did he do? He called up the former member. He said, hey, I was listening to some of the suggestions that you made, and I just wanted to let you know we have a person coming in this week to sing special music that you might enjoy hearing. Why don't you come by and check it out? What do you think the former member did? Came out, checked it out, said, you know what? Things have changed a little bit. I kind of like this. And the pastor said, well, how would you like to be involved in helping to choose some of the upcoming special musics? So I'd like that very much. Fantastic. And he started coming back to church again. Now, I'm not suggesting that you wipe out your current way of doing worship services. That's not my point here. But do you catch what I'm trying to share? Find what you can do to reach that person, to let them know that you care, and draw them back in with what their interest happens to be. And you're going to find that you do make some headway. Any questions so far on what we've covered? We've still got a long way to go this week, but anything so far on what we've covered? All right, we will have, yes? Mm-hmm. Sure. All right. Now, I tread lightly here. Everything is important. I don't want to diminish the importance of anything. However, there are some who will make an inordinately large issue out of something like veganism. Okay. For the record, I am vegan. Okay? But there are some who will make it such a big issue if somebody should dabble in cheese. All right? Or heaven forbid should put real sour cream on their haystack, right? Okay. I'm vegan, I can make fun of myself, right? So we need to make sure that that's not our gospel. Does that make sense? So there is a gospel, and is the health message part of the message, yes or no? Yes, it is. Is it the message? No, it isn't. So everything has to be in its right place. Again, can music be an issue in church? Yes. Can it be made more of an issue than it really ought to be? Yes, it can. So again, I'm being very genteel here, and I know everybody has their own perspectives and so forth, but that's kind of the idea. When those things become the overarching emphases of the church or other things, then it can take the focus off of what should be central. What should be central in the church? Jesus should be central in the church. Everything else grows out of that. And so we got to keep that perspective clear. Yes. Yes. It can, yep. Feeding a baby food that it's not ready for can choke it. That's very, very true. In fact, we're going to be talking a little bit about that coming up here very, very shortly. There's still a few chairs here. Those chairs over there in the front can be cleared if somebody would be kind enough to just take my stuff and very gently pitch it on the floor. We have a few chairs over there, so please do feel free to come in and take one. Well, don't take it, but avail yourselves of it temporarily. Yes. A couple of things. I'm going to dive into the second half of our presentation this morning, but just so that you're aware, when the time does come to leave, I have a table up here full of all sorts of goodies. I'm going to try to share a little bit more about them at the end of the message this morning. There are bags on the floor down there, so you can put stuff in a bag. Everything's free. Not the projector. Don't swipe the projector. Everything on that table, save the tablecloth. Yeah, no, laptop stays, tablecloth stays, but the stuff on top of the tablecloth, you are free to abscond with. Yeah. A cell phone better stay there too. Yes. Yes. It is part of who we are, yes. My wife is a registered dietitian. She does health lectures combined with the Bible all day long. So I have a particular place in my heart for the health message. I don't want to sound like I'm coming down on it. What I have found, though, is that there are some who make it such an importance over other things that the balance is lost. Yeah. Yes. Yep. So that's the idea. When we take something to an extreme, whether it is music or diet or something else, those become those, we'll call them quote-unquote minor issues that take the focus away from the heart of it. So please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that the health message is not important. If that's clear, let me hear a loud amen. Amen. All right. Get me fired just in like first day here. Yes.
If I understood you correctly, the minor issues, in other words, would it be people policing everyone else's behavior?
That's much of it, yes. Yep. There's a lot of judgment goes on in those minor issues. Yep. Very good. All right. And also, we're going to have passed out here during this second little segment. We finish it in 10:30, is that correct? Yes? Yes, okay, good. Just want to make sure I'm on the same page as everybody else. I'm going to have passed out a little card that if you would like to stay up on what It Is Written has available for reaching new people, for retaining your members, for upcoming trainings, lectures in your area, Bible prophecy seminars, TV programs, specials on all of our material. Every week we want to run a special, a discount on something. If you'd like to stay up on that and in touch, we have a magazine that we send out 4 times a year for free. Doesn't cost you anything. Just lets you to stay up on what's going on with It Is Written and what we have to offer you to help you in your church. So there's a little card that's going to be passed around. If you are interested in that, just fill it out and leave it up here on the front table as you leave this morning. There's also going to be a little green card that looks remarkably like this one. And on it, it says SALT 365. We have online evangelism training for your church, for anybody in your church, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for free. It costs you nothing. You can watch it anytime that you want. Probably got 85 different classes on there on everything from how to start a Bible school in your church to how to recognize conviction, how do you overcome objections that people have, how do you answer the difficult questions on health and death and hell and salvation. And anyway, there's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of stuff on there, all for free. You can just go to, and the nice thing about it is you can also download it. So you can take it and put it on the hard drive of your computer and share it during personal ministries time at your church, or if you've got a training meeting with your outreach team or something like that. So anyway, you're going to receive that as well. Just stuff that in your pocket or your purse or your wallet or something like that, and check it out when you have time. Great stuff on there. John Bradshaw does some classes on there. I do. We have some of the instructors, the professors from Southern Adventist University who teach on there as well. So anyway, check that out too. But if you're interested in staying in touch with us, then just fill out that little card and you can place it up here. And John, whenever you're ready, that's fine. All right, let me dive into the second part of our presentation this morning. As soon as my computer wakes up. You know, for years there's been a debate as to which type of computer is better, a Mac or a PC. I like It Is Written ones. I can tell it's a Mac. Some people. All right. Yeah. All right, here we go. So what happens when a person joins a church? I'm going to share with you the whole new world that exists when a person joins the church. And we're going to share this through the perspective of Mary. Mary went to a series of meetings, an evangelistic campaign. And when she came, she was convicted about what she heard. She said, "This is the truth. I believe it." Now, there was one teeny tiny, small, itty-bitty challenge that Mary faced. And that was that she was the secretary for the local Catholic Church. And so this new revelation that she had of what truth was caused no small amount of struggle in her life. She sat down with the priest and the leadership of her church and explained her new convictions, and they came to a mutually agreeable arrangement that she should depart as the secretary of the church. It just so happened that at the very time she was making her decision to leave her employment as the secretary of the Catholic Church, that the Adventist Church was looking for a new secretary. And they thought, what a perfect opportunity. And so she left the Catholic Church as the office secretary and came into the Adventist Church as the new office secretary. And that was exciting. But it wasn't ideal, because as soon as she became involved in the Adventist Church as a new Adventist Christian and kind of trying to sort out the Sabbath and some of the health message things and saying happy Sabbath on the right day and all this sort of stuff, she was also expected to be present at what? Board meetings. And I hear a lot of collective groaning going on in the audience, as if you've been in a board meeting before or something like that. What gets discussed? Bunch of garbage, dirty laundry. I mean, we can phrase it any way that we want. Sometimes the ugly underbelly of what goes on in a church gets discussed during board meetings, the stuff that most of the members don't know about. And so she was now having to process all of this and see these members every Sabbath who are coming into church and know what was really going on behind closed doors and so forth. And she just got discouraged and depressed. And there many, many times she just felt like throwing in the towel and saying, you know what? Forget it. It's not worth it. I don't have a group of close-knit friends in this new church. I feel like an outsider. I know all of the dirt that's going on in people's lives. I miss the friends that I had for so many years in the Catholic Church. Now, by God's grace, she made it through. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. So what happens when a person joins a new church? I'm going to butcher this poor fellow's name, but he is from, let me think here, Sweden, Denmark, let me get the right country here so that I don't, so he's from Scandinavia. There we go, Norwegian, he's Norwegian. A Norwegian scientist, Sverre Lisgard, you're welcome, did a study on what happened when students would become exchange students, thank you. Foreign exchange students, they would go to a new culture and they would experience something called culture shock. How many of you have ever experienced culture shock? All right. Now, culture shock doesn't just happen when you go to a new country. Culture shock can also happen when you go to a new church. Now, again, just for my knowledge here to find out whether I'm among kindred spirits or not, how many of you came into the Adventist church from some other faith? All right, so that's about half-ish, which is typically what I find in a group. I also came in. I didn't even know that Adventists existed until after I got to college. I traveled around the world, never met one, never saw a church, never, at least not to my knowledge, till after I got to college. When I became an Adventist, I'll tell you what, y'all are weird. And I say that with as much love as I possibly can. right? But yes, you're very peculiar, incredibly peculiar. But what are some things that we as Adventists do different? How are we different from the rest of the world? Looking from a worldly perspective, what are some things that are different about us? We dress different. We sure do. Yep. We go to church on the wrong day. Yep. We don't go to bars and drink alcohol, right? We eat weird food, really weird food. Haystacks. What on earth is a haystack? I drive by fields all day long. They're full of haystacks, right? Don't eat none of them. Never had a hankering for one, right? Yes. We have academies, right? Language, right? We have, yes. We drink a lot of water. We drink a lot of water, and we drink a lot of not coffee. Right? So we speak our own language. Did you know we speak our own language? We speak Adventese, right? It's Spanish. Yeah, exactly, right? It's different. It's different. And coming in from someplace else, if you don't know the lingo, if you don't know what the GC and the Spirit of Prophecy and the quarterly and 13th Sabbath and all this kind of stuff is, you're kind of going, what? And people look at you like you should just automatically know. I mean, I remember the first time somebody invited me to have a haystack. I'm like, I hope it's got a lot of sauce, you know? Right? Or, yeah, I know, right? I don't moo, so don't think. I remember when a young lady that I was dating asked me if I wanted to go to the ABC. Now, some of you know what the ABC is in some parts of the country. What is the ABC? That is the liquor store, right? For those of you who don't know. And here I thought she's this wonderful Christian girl. She said, hey, you want to go to the liquor store? I'm like, not really. But see, there is culture shock when we enter a new church. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But there's kind of a curve that people go through if they make it all the way through. At the beginning, there's this excitement and anticipation, right? They come to an evangelistic series, they go through a series of studies or something like that, and they're excited because they finally found a church that teaches the what? Truth. The truth. I'm no longer being lied to. This is the truth. Jesus is coming soon. God has a special, peculiar people. I'm a part of them. And when I go to church next Sabbath, I just know people are going to be floating 6 inches off the ground. All of them are going to have little halos. They all wear white robes, right? They're all perfect. 1 foot in heaven. Just that close, right? And they're excited. But what happens as time goes on? Well, they experience something called reality. And the reality is that Adventists aren't perfect. Present company excluded, right? But the rest of them out there, they're not perfect. And so what happens when you realize that you've got a church that supposedly is teaching the truth, that is the remnant, but the people are human? And some of the people talk about you behind your back. And some of the people aren't quite as morally upright as we thought they were. And you have to experience disfellowships. And, you know, you go out to dinner or something with somebody you thought, I thought you were vegetarian. I thought everybody was vegetarian. You're not everybody's people eat meat? Yeah. What happens when reality sets in? Then you get this culture shock and this disillusionment that happens with people. So when you, for those of you who became members, now everybody became a member at some point. We all weren't members at one point. We made a decision. But for those of you who came in from outside, do you remember what it was like when you first joined the church? What was going on in your mind? Just share something somebody who feels comfortable sharing something. When you first came into the church, what was going on in your mind? Why doesn't the whole world know this? Right? I've found the people who know it. Right? What else? Anybody else? Something positive. Yes.
When you hear a really good sermon, you're saying, amen, praise the Lord, and then all of a sudden you're told, be quiet.
That's yeah. We're enthusiastic. Amen. Praise the Lord. Shh. That's right. Give him time, enough time, and he'll become like the rest of us. Right? The frozen chosen. Now, again, I say this tongue-in-cheek, but you get it, right? Right. All right. Because people come in, they're on fire. They're excited. And what do a lot of the members who've been around for a while do? Extinguish it. Pour water on it, right? So the first stage when a person becomes a member of the church is what we often refer to as the honeymoon stage. People are enthusiastic about what they've learned, enthusiastic about this new experience. They're passionate. They can't wait to do what? Tell other people. Oh, I've got to share this with my mother, with my grandmother, who's a Catholic, right? I've got to let her know. I can't wait. I want to let the world know. They have an idealistic view of the church. True? Yeah. Adventist truths appear self-evident. Why can't anybody else see this? It's so clear, right? They're experiencing victory over their sins. They're feeling great. Members go out of their way to welcome them. We pour a lot of interest, a lot of devotion, a lot of attention on people until what happens? Until they get baptized. And as soon as they get baptized, we have a big celebration that Sabbath. We have a cake with their names on it, right? We extend the right hand of fellowship to them, welcome them into the church, and then what happens the following week in many cases? Yeah. Dip them and drop them is the phrase that's often used. Dip them and drop them. It's sad, but is it in many cases reality? Okay. Are we going to improve if we don't address reality? No. So we've got to hit some of the tough stuff if we want to move past it and heal what's happening. So unfortunately, this mentality does exist in many churches. Here's what also happens. Many members don't feel comfortable going up and talking with a new member. They feel uncomfortable. Okay. So who is it that often connects with the new members? Sometimes it's other new members. You're right. They'll form a little group in and of themselves. Do you know who often has no qualms whatsoever about going up and connecting with a new person? Offshoots. Offshoots. It's the groups that are in the church that are, I affectionately, if I can use that term, I affectionately call them snipers. Okay? Here's what they do. They will let the church do all the hard work of bringing them in from the community, of sharing the truth with them, of helping them make the decision to get baptized. Let the church do all that. And then once they get baptized and the new members kind of shy away from them, then they will come in and pick them off. Say, you know what, isn't it great, the things that you've learned? But you know there's something that you didn't hear. There's something more. They're open to more new things right now. They're primed for it. And so these offshoots, these snipers come in, and they say, here's what the pastor didn't tell you. If you want to know more light, more truth, why don't you come over to my house Sabbath afternoon? We're going to have a study group together. And before long, gone.
Isn't that the way Lucifer did in heaven?
Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. And it happens today. If you don't think it's happening, you need to wake up. It happens. So what can we do? What can we do? So the honeymoon stage then kind of devolves down into disillusionment. Now, if somebody doesn't get connected, if they don't build the circle of friends, of influence that they need, then many times what's going to happen to them in this disillusionment stage? I'm going to go out the church, right? Because there's nobody there to catch them, nobody there to embrace them. But it doesn't have to be that way. Here's what you see in disillusionment. They discover that there's politics in the church. How many of you are shocked to learn this? It exists, doesn't it? Yep. And they realize that it exists, and they become more discouraged. Family members begin to raise questions about what they believe. What? Why are you keeping Saturday? Don't you know you're not under the law? You're under grace, right? When Jesus died on the cross, he did away with the law. Don't you know the commandments were nailed to the cross? They were abolished. You're being Jewish. Jesus has come, right? Don't you remember the sheet that God let down from heaven with all the food in it? And what did God say to Peter? He says, it's all good. Rise, Peter. Kill it. Why would you go against what God says? And they don't have the foundation to be able to answer these questions. Now, some of you may be going, I don't know how I'd answer that either. There's a wonderful website that you can go to. You're just going to plug it a little bit more, right? Make this a visit of yours. And if not just for yourself, then somebody else. It's there. It's available. It's free. So just check it out. We even make it really easy. You know, on your Samsung, Apple, I'm okay either way. You have an app or can get an app for free on your phone. It's called a QR code scanner. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay. It's this little checks box looking thing on the back. You scan it with your smartphone. It'll start playing immediately on your smartphone. Okay? So you don't even have to go home and type it into your computer or anything like that. Just you can watch it right wherever you happen to be on your phone. So we're trying to make this easy as possible. Right? So friends outside the church reject the new believer's faith. Friends inside the church are hard to come by. And they start to experience guilt over recurring sins. They had some victory, but then life happens, and they fall back into those same sins and so forth that were beating them up beforehand, and they start to say, you know what, I can't keep this up. I can't do this. I don't have the strength. I don't have the power. And they get discouraged, they get disillusioned, and off they go. However, if somebody makes it through this stage, and we're going to be talking this week about how to help them through this stage, that's kind of where the rest of the week is going. If somebody can be helped through this stage, then they experience what it's like to feel at home in their new church. They begin to understand Adventese, right? They begin to understand the culture within the church. This new worship service that they've been experiencing for the last few months doesn't seem quite as foreign anymore. They start to build a circle of friends within the church that are not just Sabbath friends. You know, it always amuses me, and I have to use that word very carefully. Do you know what it means if somebody greets you on Sabbath and says, "Happy Sabbath, brother. Happy Sabbath, sister"? You know what that means more often than not? It means they don't know your name. I feel okay because I can wish you a happy Sabbath, but I don't really know your name. If we don't know one another's names in church, how close are we one to another? Yeah. In your church, how many people that attend on a regular basis do you not know the first name of? How many could you not walk up to and say, "John, it's good to see you this morning"? It's not quiz time right now. Right?
I know their name because we're a small group.
Okay, small. You have an advantage if you're a small group. Yeah, that's cheating, right? But honestly, and we're going to talk about what we can do this week to get to know one another's names. And sometimes it's really, really simple. I mean, so simple that you just go, why didn't I think of that? Yes?
On average, how long is each phase, and then how long does it take from them to be a new believer to the at-home?
It's going to vary from person to person. Typically, this honeymoon stage will last a month, 2 months, maybe. And again, it's going to vary depending on the person and their surroundings, their situation. This disillusionment phase, it needs to be short. If it's not short, they end up dropping out. So we're going to talk again this week about how we can squeeze that phase to make it as short as possible. Yes? Yes. Yep. Fantastic. Fantastic. It works. It works. Yep. Very good. So our goal is to get them to feel at home. So how do we do this? How do we make disciples and not members? If I were to ask you, what's the Great Commission? The Great Commission is found where? Matthew chapter 28 verses. It depends whether you say 16 through 20, 18 through 20, somewhere in that neighborhood. And depending on the version that you happen to have, whether it's King James or New King James, Jesus says, go therefore and what? Make disciples of all nations. This is one of my favorite little picking points, I guess you might say. If I were to ask you what a disciple is, what is a disciple? A follower of Christ. That is the answer that I hear almost universally. Now, have you ever taken an exam where the instructions on the top of the exam for a multiple choice exam said, choose the most correct answer? Have you ever taken one of those exams? How do you feel when you get that exam? No small amount of apprehension, right? Because you know that there is more than one correct answer. But you are looking for the most correct answer. So what is a disciple? A disciple is a follower of Christ or a follower of Jesus. That is a correct answer. But it is not the most correct answer. I like that, a disciple maker. Here, if you look up the dictionary definition of a disciple, here's what you will find. A disciple is one who subscribes to the teachings of a master and assists in spreading them. That is a disciple. Not just somebody who believes, but somebody who believes and shares with somebody else. And then teaches that person how to share with somebody else. Who teaches that person how to share with somebody else. Now does this whole Great Commission thing take on a new meaning? See, it's not just, what is, I think I've got a slide in here later, but I may jump ahead. What is the fruit of an apple tree? Say it again. It is another tree from the seed. That's the fruit of an apple tree. Is another apple tree. And another apple tree. And another apple tree. It doesn't end at the apple. The apple tree's desire, if you will, is to make more apple trees. That's what it does with the seeds in the apples that it produces. So we, as disciples, ought to be making disciples, who then do what? Make disciples. So that's really the goal, is not to just get new members in the church. We're good at that. We're one of the best at that. How good are we at making disciples? That's a little different story. Now again, I'm not going to ask for shows of hands in here. Actually, you know what? I am going to ask for a show of hands. We've got a good-sized group in here. How many ministers are in here? I'm curious. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're right. I did not say pastors. I said ministers. Let me see the hands again. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're getting closer. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. We're still not quite where we want to be. How many ministers in here? Every one of us is a minister. Every one of us is a minister. Until we get this, here's what happens. We say, oh, giving Bible studies? That's the pastor's job. That's the Bible worker's job. Winning souls? That's the evangelist's job. You know whose quote-unquote job it is?
Everybody.
It's us. It's our job. Every one of us. But I can't preach. It's all right. God didn't say you had to preach.
Right.
But you can be a witness. Yes?
Eric, in 2 Timothy 2, verse 2, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also.
Thank you. Case in point. That was 2 Timothy? 2 Timothy 2:2. Thank you very much. Perfect. So we share with them, they share with others, and on and on. So what do you want in a new believer's life? I'm going to put up some points here. In fact, one point, and it spells point. So what do you want to see in a new believer's life? You want to see a personal devotional life. I really don't have the statistics on it, and I probably ought to, of how many members of the Adventist Church have a personal daily devotional life. I could guess, and my guess would be a very low percentage. 20%. Yeah, the 20% that works, it's probably fairly close to that. Yes?
Several years ago, our good folks at the GC put out a statistic,
25%.
25%.
Fantastic. From the General Conference a few years ago. So that's right on close to the 20%. Excellent. Well, not excellent, but illustrative. Outreach and evangelism. Involvement in the church. A network of Christian friends and theological maturity. These are things that we would like to see in a new member's life. Now, honestly, we would like to see them where? In everybody's life. It's a little tougher to teach the proverbial old dog new tricks. It's not impossible. But when a new person comes in, they are open to change. They're already involved in change. And so if we can start to instill some of these things in their life, then there's a much higher likelihood that they're going to continue through that disillusionment phase and into the feeling at home stage. You know, there's a story found in Luke 15 of the prodigal son. How many of you remember that story? When he came back, the older brother wasn't thrilled. Now, I'll give you a little background as to when this story was going on. The context of this story is that Jesus was eating with sinners and he was paying special attention to them. Who didn't like what he was doing? Pharisees didn't. Pharisees came with their fingers wagging, didn't they? Right? And so Jesus tells them a story. It's this story. So he then answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I've been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. He says, listen, we've been doing the right stuff. This guy, he says, I've been doing the right stuff. This guy, he's a mess. And yet you care, or seem to care, more about him than you care about me. Are there any Pharisees in the church? Just a couple, one or two. I have worked with churches. I have worked with churches who have well nigh run out new members who were baptized in a campaign because the new people did not come up to their standard of what they believed was right. Now, we got to understand. We got to understand. When people come in, they're babies. All right? If by the grace of God, a person can come in to hit the health message again for just a moment. If they can come in no longer smoking and doing drugs, no longer drinking alcohol, right? No longer eating unclean foods, if they're still eating hamburgers and chicken nuggets, praise the Lord. All All right? There's time, and they may or may not move further than that. But don't expect somebody to come up overnight to where you are today. Question, how long did it take you to get to where you are today? Every one of you has exactly the same answer. Your whole life. It took you your entire life to get to where you are today. Now, am I saying that we should not encourage people? No, I'm not saying that at all. We should encourage them. Growth should be, growth must be an integral part of a healthy Christian's walk. It must be. But let's not expect people over the course of a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months to come up to where we happen to be today. For some of us, it's taken us a long time to get here. Right? Yes. And there was a hand over here. I don't want to. Yes. Yep. Very good. Very good. Yep. Yes.
I read something not long ago that said to the effect, I can love you as long as you don't sin any differently than I do.
Yes. I can love you as long as you don't sin any differently than I do. Well said. Well said. I've got a couple slides to finish in 1 minute, so I'm going to move on through here. Some common errors of the Pharisees. You'll have these on your sheets as well. Judge those who think differently from you. Expect people to become instantly mature. Become resentful when a new believer has a more passionate relationship with God. Does that happen? Yep. You ever met somebody in the church who looked like they'd been baptized in lemon juice? They're there. They're there. They worry about the minor matters of the law, if you will. Let me hit Ingrid's story very, very quickly, and then we'll tie it off. Ingrid came in through an evangelistic series, was very excited, and so forth. When she came in, she was excited that Jesus was coming soon, that she was a part of the remnant, and was very excited about this. However, once she got into the church and into the regular routine of things, the regular Sabbath preaching was not as exciting as the evangelistic series. Sometimes the elders would preach, and it was not all that exciting. They only got together once a week on Sabbath mornings. It wasn't 4 or 5 nights a week. The music was not nearly as good as it had been during the evangelistic series. There was kind of a feeling that, well, it's Oswald's turn to sing. He hasn't sung since last year for good reason, but we need to put him in again. And no offense to Oswald if Oswald happens to be here today. But things changed, and then Ingrid became very discouraged when it kind of felt like she wasn't in the church she thought she was being a part of. None of the members really reached out, the established members really reached out and embraced her, so she developed a friendship with the other new members who had come in, and they became a little group among themselves. Eventually, somebody did show an interest in them. It was one of the snipers. And they came in and they started to teach about how the Trinity that the Adventist Church teaches was really not biblical. It was a false teaching that had come in, and they gave their evidence, which some of you have probably heard in recent months and or years because it's making a resurgence again. And so what ended up happening was Ingrid and her friends didn't end up building a relationship with the church. They ended up building a relationship with one another and with a search for new things. And so when this non-Trinitarian teaching was introduced to them, they thought, oh, a new thing. And off they went, and the entire group left and didn't come back. So how do we build these bonds? How do we build these friendships, these relationships? That's what we're looking at this week. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the time that you've given us together this morning. We ask that you'll bless us through the remainder of our day. Bring us back through the week so that we can see simple things we can do to prevent these things from happening. Lord, most of the people just want to know that we care about them. And there are things we can do to express that. So we ask that you would help us to learn those things and to put them into practice and share with the other members of our church so that we can keep those that have been worked so hard with by us and by your Spirit to reach. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Again, please do visit